Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the On podcast. We were joined today by Imam Tom Facchine. He is of Italian descent and is an American. He converted to Islam, mashallah, in 2010. He finished his BA in political science from Vassar College in 2011. And then, alhamdulillah, he was granted the opportunity to study at Madinah University. And he got a BA from the Faculty of Sharī'ah. He was there from 2015 to 2020. And then eventually he ended up as a research director of Islam and Society at Yaqeen Institute of Islamic Research. And everybody loves the Yaqeen Institute. Everybody in Pakistan loves the Yaqeen Institute, by the way.
SubhanAllah. That's a high praise.
No.
We love the people of Pakistan. Pakistan's in the bottom.
Wow, you'll get some points for that. But the real question is, will you sacrifice your life for Pakistan?
Oh, there's only one correct answer to that question.
Yeah. It's the classic. And also, and in no particular order, it's also very important to mention, he, mashallah, teaches through an online institute known as the Legacy International Online High School. He teaches Tafsīr of the Quran to middle schoolers all over the world, I suspect, considering that it's online.
Yeah, so we have a couple students that are based in Pakistan and India.
Wow, that's really great. If you guys are watching, we have your beloved Imam. We love him and he loves us. With us, he's been very kind. We've taken up like half an hour even before the interview. There is no context in which I would have met you in any other context, honestly, except this one, the one that we have on our hands right now. It's very tragic. We have a crisis in the Ummah again, something that you and I, when we were growing up in high school, would have thought. I mean, maybe considering that you weren't a Muslim back then, but you definitely saw it as a global crisis, considering that America was at the forefront, which was the war on terror and the 9/11 and then Iraq and Afghanistan. It must have been part of your formative experiences as a youth. It was mine as well, considering that I'm a Muslim in Pakistan. It seems like we've entered another stage. We've just had the defense minister of Israel, tweet out a picture of Saddam Hussein being captured and pulled out of a tunnel and beaten bloody. We've had Donald Trump threaten, the president of the United States, threaten the brave people of Iran with expulsion by clearly saying that you need to leave Tehran, and something big is coming. Are we looking at another enduring freedom? And how do we as Muslims with little to no agency and power, in the whole grand scheme of things, what are we supposed to do, Imam?
Very good. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It is true that I do love the people of Pakistan, and we have many folks in the diaspora here in the United States, so I'm very happy to be on this platform. And we were talking before the program started that when things calm down and there's not a genocide going on, I would love to visit Pakistan as soon as possible. Very important questions, though. I would push back on the idea that we don't have power. I want to display my
your power level
for Sami Hamdi here, and he, wow, I think, is one of the most eloquent people when coming to trying to make Muslims realize the power that we have. Pakistan is no stranger to this. Look at what just happened with India not too long ago.
Yes.
Right? Like I think you could say that the entire post-colonial era for many of the Muslim states, or we should say Muslim majority nation states, has been securitization, accumulating power. But the open-ended question has been, when do you use that power? How do you use that power? And we have seen there's like a typology here, that there are several tracks that things go down. One is that there's a kleptocracy that takes charge of a particular nation state, where the rulers are really only interested in enriching themselves, and the power that they accumulate is actually only about protecting their own seats and their own positions. It's used against the populace, and it's never going to be ever used against any enemies of the Ummah or any evil characters at all. There's a second scenario in which there are well-meaning state actors and state apparatuses, governing apparatuses, that have accumulated some power, and yet they are afraid to use it. They have, for whatever reason, they've been able to justify. Everybody's afraid of course, the United States military and full-on, active offensive involvement from the United States military, which is a very, very valid concern. But what we haven't seen too much of yet is the these post-colonial Muslim-majority nation states testing their power to find out how much power they actually have. When Pakistan handed it to India not too long ago, I mean, proper spanked them, right? As we would say. Alhamdulillah, walillah alhamd, that this was something that I think is extremely significant for the Ummah and the Ummah's confidence. That to notice that we do have power. This is not the 60s or the 70s where the balance of power across the world is so tilted. We've got drone technology now. You've got the democratization of certain technologies. There are different avenues. We have said many times that this is the first live streamed genocide. Certainly not the first genocide, not even the only one going on right now, but maybe the first one to be live streamed. And that creates new possibilities for leverage and for public opinion and for pressure. To think that, it's interesting to watch Israeli propaganda because Israel is stuck in a pre-social media world. Much of their propaganda is calibrated to a pre-social media world in which they enjoyed a very tight control over the messaging and what people were exposed to. It's very telling to me that they brought out images of a captured Saddam Hussein. That's the world in which they're still imagining exists. The world has changed completely. It's not the same world anymore. You have people who are able to access and see exactly what's happening on the ground. You have people live streaming Tel Aviv and Tehran right now to be able to see what is happening. You've got Telegram channels where the second that something hits the ground, people are reporting it. You can't get around people so easily anymore and construct the narratives, which is why you see so much pushback even inside the US, even on the right wing, to potential military escalation. People are not buying. They're not convinced anymore by the same type of rhetoric that was much easier to deceive people with in a pre-social media, pre-integrated world. So what it is that the world has changed. Technologies have shifted. Levers, both of hard power and of soft power, continue to progress and to develop, and we find new levers of power. Who's going to be able to wield them effectively? Who's going to be able to exercise them? I would say that things have never looked brighter for the Ummah when it comes to the ability to push back, the ability to control discourse, the ability to speak directly to the American people, the ability to speak directly to the populaces of the nations that are aggressors or that are thinking about getting involved or supporting aggression. There are a ton of opportunities that exist this day and age that didn't previously exist even a mere 20 years ago. And so as a conscientious ummah, we need to start, and we have, mashallah, we have brilliant people, we have tech-savvy people, we have people doing amazing work in a lot of different fields. Really what it is, it's about identifying opportunities, it's about leveraging those opportunities, and it's about coordinating those opportunities in order to exercise this type of power in an effective way. I'll stop there because there's a lot of directions that this could go.
There's so many, mashallah, many valid points. You compared how it was so different just 20 years ago during the war on terror. We didn't have the luxury of the internet and all these resources. And mashallah, I would like to say in particular the American diaspora and convert community of just Muslims from all ethnic backgrounds, people like you, people like Sheikh Umar Suleiman and so many others. I mean, it's hard to name everyone in one conversation. They've really changed up the game in terms of coming into the mainstream of an American audience, talking to regular American people. We're just like people just like you. And I think the appetite for this kind of, genocide is going away because people now have to see directly what their governments are doing and what their militaries are doing in, all of these so-called forever wars with the sand people, all over the world. First of all, we're not all sand people. The topography is all different. We all look different. We all speak different languages. We eat different food. And the monolithic sort of understanding of Islam is breaking away for a lot of people. You're right. I think that the idea that we're completely helpless as individuals is not true. As far as states are concerned, I would disagree with you as well. It is true. While it is true that the new post-colonial states in the 60s and 70s sort of were biding their time and sort of quietly getting along with whatever project that they were aligned with. If they were aligned with the Soviet Union, they were in that bloc. If they were aligned with the Americans, they were in that bloc. I think Pakistan in the 80s and 90s tried even then to sort of flex its wings along with its allies, Saudi Arabia, when we prosecuted the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union, which was an oppressive entity, when we were involved very deeply with the Bosnian conflict, when we were involved very deeply with Chechnya. Again, Saudis were very proactive in their foreign policy. Pakistan was sort of their sidekick. Sometimes we were the captain of the team. It's like a weird sort of relationship that we had, which culminated in the development of nuclear technology, which pretty much Pakistan is sort of the main pillar on which Pakistan stands today, even more so than maybe the vision of Pakistan itself. You know, the simple fact that we have nuclear tech is the framework that holds us together. I think the attempts have always been made. I think the noticing on the level of the average public has begun now, where they're actively seeing what their states, what collectives, groups of people, what governments, what ordinary citizens have been trying to do for the last 50, 60, 70 odd years since we've been rid of direct colonial occupation. And they're also seeing the strings that still hold, colonial entities together, us as colonies and them as colonizers, but sort of in more obtuse and through monetary institutions or international courts or any of these institutions. In particular, what do you think the American Muslims are feeling right now? Like you mentioned with the Pakistan conflict, and now with the aggression with Iran, and then the whole context for the last 2 years with the genocide in Palestine. They protested, we saw it, they led the boycott movement, we followed. American Muslims have done a great deal of work. But do they feel more empowered? Or do they feel, because there was a community that supported Trump under the anti-war rhetoric, do they feel like they're being represented locally, on the national level, internationally? Do they feel like they're making a difference? And are they, not saying standing with Iran necessarily, but are they against with the aggression that is being, carried out? And how can they add to this?
That's a great question. I compare, or I visualize the American Muslim community, which is quite diverse, to a snake that is shedding its skin because it is growing and is outgrowing the current skin that it previously inhabited. So if you look at the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and the Muslim community's reactions, there were several reactions, but I think they had a similar underlying logic. You saw more attempts to portray a friendly Islam, an American Islam, something that is very palatable. So there were a lot of efforts to convince Americans that we're not very different, us and you, we're really just the same at the end of the day. Unfortunately, that was tied up with a lot of distancing from some of what the deen requires, right? Part of that dynamic was a turning away a bit from Islam itself and what it asked you to do, or certainly not something that was rooted in dignity and pride in one's deen.
सबसे पहले आप सबका बहुत शुक्रिया हमें सब्सक्राइब करने के लिए। जिन दोस्तों ने हमारी फैमिली में शामिल हुए 3000 की सब्सक्रिप्शन लेके काइंडली हमें व्हाट्सएप किया करें, ताकि हमें पता हो कि हमने किस ग्रुप में ऐड करना है। वैसे जो आप सब्सक्राइब कर रहे हैं, इसके लिए आपको 12 वीडियोस हर महीने मिलेंगे जो प्राइवेट वीडियोस होंगे, यानी कि वो कंटेंट किसी ने ना पहले देखा होगा, ना वो कभी किसी मेन चैनल पे अपलोड होगा। वो सिर्फ आपके कंजम्पशन के लिए होगा जो 3000 की सब्सक्रिप्शन पे कर रहे हैं। अब वो कंटेंट होगा क्या? उसमें आपको लाइफ स्टोरीज पता चलेंगी, कुछ फिलोसॉफिकल आइडियाज़ डिस्कस होंगे, कुछ पर्टिकुलर इंसिडेंट्स होते हैं जिसकी वजह से चैनल्स डिमोनेटाइज हो जाते हैं, वो ग्रेट डिटेल में डिस्कस होंगे। कुछ आपके साथ कंटेंट शेयर किया जाएगा जो अवेलेबल नहीं है आम पब्लिक को, और जो पब्लिकली उस तरह शेयर भी नहीं हो सकता। मोस्टली चीज़ें एजुकेशन रिलेटेड होंगी, हर चीज़ का कोई लेसन होगा पीछे, लेकिन ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा इसको आप सब्सक्राइब करें ताकि आप हमारे काम को सपोर्ट कर सकें। तो प्लीज़ हमें सब्सक्राइब करें, 3000 रुपीज़ भेजें, व्हाट्सएप करें और ईऑन फैमिली का हिस्सा बनें। थैंक यू।
There were also other initiatives that were extremely risk averse. Of course, it was an enormous crackdown. The government had created a legal mechanism to prosecute anybody and everybody. We saw with court cases such as with the Holy Land Foundation that they could admit secret evidence. You could be on a secret list, and you could disappear, and nobody would be able to save you. That by and large, the community turned away from political engagement of that type and turned to relief efforts and turned to soft power efforts, trying to create a positive image. I say that because that is not the response now of the Muslim community in the post-October 7th world, and given the genocide that has unfolded and now continuing to the aggression against Iran. That by and large, and especially with the younger generation, the Muslims have realized that, to quote, no, I won't go there. We were talking about The Godfather and the spaghetti difference of Hollywood.
No, go ahead. You can give the example. You woke up this morning, got yourself a gun.
The initial scene, I believe in America, right? It's like that
I believe in America. I was like, can I do the voice? I'm sorry.
Exactly. That used to be the attitude that if we just play by the rules, we'll be okay and we'll be safe.
Yes.
Muslims have learned the hard way that even if you play by the rules, even if you try to present yourself in the most innocent, disarming way as possible, it's not enough for the Zionists. It's not enough for the people, the enemies of Islam, the Islamophobia industry, the people, the Daniel Pipes, and all of the network of people who, and we just did a video on this on Yaqeen Institute's YouTube channel. You can check out to see the different connections and the network, that all of the millions and billions of dollars that are spent to smear Islam and Muslims, to make them seem like a national security threat or a terrorist threat, this will not go away, no matter how polite you are, no matter how likable you are. And so there's
Israel's always going to finance some Indian guy to act like a white guy on Twitter to talk
there
about
are false flags. There are false flags. There are all sorts of things that could happen.
Right.
Muslims have started to wake up to the reality that we have to face this situation head on, and we have to confront our enemies and outmaneuver them politically, that it's not simply going to go away. And this has been tremendously liberating, I believe, for the Muslim American community, because now we're starting to be able to take pride in our deen and embrace the ways in which we are different, not in a belligerent way or an insensitive way or in a reckless way, but in a place that comes from principle and dignity, and from a place that demonstrates to American society, broader American society, we belong here, we're here to stay, and we actually have principles and insights that you stand to benefit from. Your nation, or our nation, the United States, this is not my words, this is Candace Owens and some of the social media influencers on the right. This nation is occupied by Israeli political influence. Congress is bought by Israeli political influence and advocacy. These are not Muslims saying this. These are not even leftists saying this. These are people on the right wing that are saying this now. That Muslims can stand tall and say, we believe in this, we believe in that, and...
Or you could start with, we told you so.
Well, yeah, absolutely, right? So this is the thing. I mean, that there's a renewed attitude. There's a sense now of confrontation. There's a sense that there's no way around this but through. There's no way under or around or over. We have to go through this. And it's a tremendous fitna. It's in the literal sense of the word. It's in a tremendous test of character for who is going to back down and try to retreat to a similar post 9/11 logic of, there were CVE. So there were the CVE program was one of the programs where the FBI was using Muslims informants to spy on the Muslim community within mosques and make lists of people and all this sort of thing. That there were post 9/11, there were people that were justifying these efforts as well. We just have to cooperate, and then if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. That attitude is now over. That we refuse to participate in injustice, whether it's the police state injustice, the cracking down of ICE, right, which is really now they're just seizing people off of the street and attempting to deport them, the disrespect and disregard for rule of law, the chaos that's part of any Trump presidency, the escalation with Iran, all of it is together. It all forms a singularity in which Muslims, by and large, though there are still some stragglers, by and large realize that we have to confront and we have to outmaneuver these forces. And if we don't, it's not just our necks on the line, but it's also largely the necks of the Ummah. That there's a realization that the American exceptionalism, which used to mean that, well, we just want to worry about American issues. What does it affect me if the U.S. is escalating in Iran? What does it affect me if normalization with Israel? That's the old American exceptionalism. The new American exceptionalism, which is the one that I push for in the Muslim community, is that we are exceptionally responsible. That the United States is one of the most significant forces in terms of geopolitics and international relations. And as people who are here, who do business here, who live here, who are citizens here, who spend money here, who vote here, we have a unique responsibility to prevent the harm of the United States from reaching the Ummah. And alhamdulillah, I think people, every day that passes, people are waking up more and more. So people recognize, despite how they feel towards Iran, and I, as a person, individually, I can say, I will never forgive Iran for what they did to Syria, right? I understand that, in fact, it's a tremendous missed opportunity that Iran rather has actually put itself in a position where the Ummah cannot rally behind it, because they have pursued a sectarian agenda and sectarian butchery for decades. There's a scenario post-1979 where they had not pursued such a sectarian agenda and not resorted to such butchery, and it would have paid off in this moment, where there would have been a lot more solidarity and rallying behind them. I don't let Iran off for the things that they've done and the crimes that they've committed. That being said, that people understand that the Israeli aggression is the most dangerous and existential threat to the Ummah as a whole and to Muslims in the United States. When Israel comes to the United States and lobbies our own government trying to criminalize us, they would like the Muslim Brotherhood to be considered a foreign terrorist organization. They would like all of our organizations here in the United States to be considered terrorist organizations. They would like to change the Quran if they could. And some of them have admitted such, right? That this is the true threat. And so there is solidarity with Iran in terms of its pushback and its willing to stand up to the Zionist occupation, in hopes that the United States will simply at least not escalate its involvement even further than it already is, or even draw down on its involvement if we're able to create pressure in a way that everybody on earth knows that without the United States support, Israel cannot possibly exist as a colonial entity, that they would have to radically change the apartheid and Jewish supremacist state that they currently have without explicit and generous American support. So we have a unique responsibility in order to do what it takes to disrupt this and hopefully end once and for all this support of the United States for these criminal regimes.
That's a very valid argument, and I think people have been arguing it for a while, but I think it's really come into its own in the last, I would say, 5 years, especially. I think the 7th of October has been a very galvanizing event, even more so than a 9/11, because 9/11 sort of scared people straight, we have to comply with all the surveillance and the Patriot Act, and, we have to go along with all of this, even though, habeas corpus has been practically, trampled upon by the Obama administration, and he's taking out Muslim Americans at home and abroad. They're abducting people, they're assassinating people. So people went quiet because they were afraid and rightfully so. But I'm not gonna knock on people for being afraid of America at that time. It was a big, scary. In Pakistani columnists, they used to describe America as a wild elephant. on a rampage through the jungle. So you better watch out that you're not trampled. In Urdu, it sounds much better, much more flowery, but I'm sure it translates well enough, the imagery. So yeah, America was a scary elephant, and it was willing to crush its own citizens. Its own, so-called the American exceptionalism idea was challenging in of itself. That you even though you might have had a green card or a passport or a citizenship or card or whatever, but you would still be subject to this tyrannical war on terror regime, surveillance regime. I think the fight. I'm a bit more cynical. I think the fight was lost like 20, 30 years ago. So even though the people are coming around to this change, I think it's pretty much set in stone the direction which the American state and general European countries want to go in. And it's not something that you can reverse, but you could delay, like you were suggesting, that you could delay or abate or at least create an environment where it's slowed down. I don't want to be too cynical for the sake of the audience, but I think that I don't know if it work, because in terms of alliances, your options initially were limited to sort of the center of the left, like liberals. Classically, that's what Pakistan, Muslim community in America or whatever, they allied with. Now the horizon has opened up with far leftists and the far right, where like if you go far enough on the spectrum, this sort of loops around the sort of horseshoe kind of, it's the same kind of ideas but packaged in a less or more racist way. See, I don't think it's going to work. Like you have the No Kings thing going on, fighting ICE and talking about deportations. That's one movement. But the same people who would have similar anti-war ideas would be cheering on the ICE, deportations, but also mad at Trump for getting involved with Israel and with Iran. And at the same time, if you go to this side, they'll accuse you of having dual loyalties. And if you go to this side, the package comes with, all the nice gender and sex theory and this postmodernist, post-colonial, whatever, post, go postal, whatever thought that they have. So who do you ally with and what do you do? How useful is it to view the world in this post-colonial way or in this tribal way? In this tribal way where you're like, yes, you're right, we have dual loyalties, here's our passports, we're going back to wherever we came from. Where does the American
Jersey.
Muslim go?
Going back to New Jersey.
You go back to New Jersey. Where does everyone else, what do we do?
So that's a really rich question. I think it depends on how we understand historical change to happen.
Is it too rich for your taste?
Sorry?
Is it too rich for your taste?
No, it's like a nice spicy biryani, mashallah. It's got all the, with the anise and everything, the cardamom right in there. I think though that this is the wedge issue between a politics which is grounded in a theological metaphysical discourse and a politics which is a bit more materialistic. And I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just saying that in general, we do have to recognize the role of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his favor in how history unfolds. That there are some things that defy naturalistic causation in history, the history of the historical critical method or Marxist historical materialism. That is important to register. Why? Because it properly identifies or clarifies the scope of action. So within the materialist discourse, it's actually quite depressing, right? You're right. It's like we are Muslims. We are 1% to 3% of the American population. We do have a lot of wealth, generally speaking. Not saying that all Muslims in the West are wealthy. They're definitely not. But we certainly have some top earners, doctors, lawyers, tech people, etc. But we ultimately don't have a lot of power. Therefore, we must ally with other people, kind of figure out this big coalition. And once we grab our coalition together, then we're going to be able to force change and whatever. And therefore, we are beholden to whatever model of change or entire platform or agenda our coalition or our allies dictate. Things are a lot messier than that, in my opinion. that the activation energy required for true change might not be that high, that there might be a ladder of change which starts at disruption and destabilization and then escalates to something more concrete. Sometimes disruption and destabilization simply provides the space for another opportunity to come about that you can't even foresee what's going to happen. And many of these things have already happened. Who has foreseen some of the shifts, even on the right? If we were having this conversation 5 years ago, right? People say there's no way, no chance anybody on the right wing is going to support Palestine. Not going to happen. Look at how much the discourse has changed. And this is partially part of the technology, part of social media, part of the globalized digital world, which has created these fissures in the discourse where there's less control, there's more democratization, which also makes gathering your enormous coalition a little bit less necessary than it is just to get a compelling message out there that's going to neutralize certain vectors of action and interests. Right now, even within the Trump White House, there's two big vectors of philosophy when it comes to foreign policy. You've got your China first, Israel first. You could boil it down to that. Now, because even the America First people, it's really more of a slogan than anything. They really are concerned about China. Okay. So if you have people, and right now this is actually being argued when it comes to the redeployment of fuel tankers to the Middle East in order to protect Israel. There are people in Trump's cabinet and in the government that are very against it. They're saying, no, this is completely like botching our vision. China is much more of a strategic priority. We'd rather keep our presence in the South China Sea than to redivert these things to protect Israel from acting crazy, right? And then the other is well known, right? So these are opportunities, okay? And when opportunities come about, sometimes you just need a little bit of a chaos agent or a little bit of something to stop the train in order for new possibilities to emerge. Trump represents that, which is part of the conversation that we had to have, and it was a very difficult conversation to have in 2024 in an election year. Who do you support? Nobody likes Trump. Even the Muslims who voted for Trump directly, I don't believe that there's very many people who actually like him or think that he is a positive influence on the world. What people hoped from him was destabilization, because we knew that even in the previous Trump presidency, he destabilized some things to the point where they didn't even work. Take, for example, the CBE program. That was a program countering violent extremism that was designed to spy on Muslims within their mosques, create a huge database, criminalize us, etc. This was an Obama-era program that died under Trump. Not because Trump is a good person, not because Trump has any principles or that he did it intentionally. It died despite him. Trump comes in, he renames the program Countering Violent Islamism or something like this. People quit the program out of protest because he's so, as we call, ham-fisted, that he's like we would say, not an elephant in the jungle, but a bull in a china shop, what we would say, that he doesn't have any finesse. He doesn't have the suave characteristics of Obama. He's so crude and he's so in your face and just vile in the way that he goes about things that it's the opposite of the Midas touch, that everything he touches turns to dust. And so this entire program dissolved overnight because of his incompetence. That is the possibility that comes along with the Trump presidency. And those are the types of possibilities now that we are hoping for in a Machiavellian, very dystopian sort of sense. That there is a scenario in which Trump wakes up one day and he feels like Netanyahu is using him, and he throws a temper tantrum like a toddler, and he completely changes course on how the United States supports Israel. That is actually an imaginable scenario with Trump in office, where that would never have been imaginable with a Democrat.
So there are bureaucratic and sort of technocratic elements to modern nation states which don't allow for this room for statesmen to sort of screw up and drop the ball. They affect optics a lot, and we can hope for this, for the hand of God, like you said. We believe in a particular course of history which is directed by our Lord Allah, but at the same time there are safety mechanisms in check within states. It's quite clear that Israel has been thrown off its game. It's not the Israel of 20 years ago. It's not. It's facing backlash. It's facing all this trouble. Trump is sort of even enjoying it. He made that weird statement, sometimes you have to let them fight it out. It's the same treatment that he gave to Pakistan and India, and then he did weird flip-flop statements on the recent conflict with Iran, where he would do 180s about negotiating and then not negotiating, and then now he's threatened to, essentially, in quoted words, to carpet bomb Tehran. And he's bought 24, 12, 18, however many hours for whatever negotiations to happen, in the back channels to happen. So you're right, he has shaken up the system, and simply by virtue of shaking it up as this element of chaos or this agent of chaos, and us being opportunistic or Machiavellian, we need to push in our agendas with the groups that are, like you mentioned, within his camp, within his lobby as well, who are anti-Israel, or not Israel first at the least. Most of them aren't really anti-Israel, even if they're just not Israel first. They're maybe Israel second and third. And that makes sense. But what does that mean in the here and now for the American Muslims? Like you said, can they face these kinds of deportations? Can they go out and protest? Can they run the risk of what's happening to people I think that gentleman from El Salvador, something Kilmar, he ended up there even though he had gotten asylum specifically not to be sent to El Salvador. The Turkish woman who was doing, she was in a master's program and then she was abducted. Or do you think people have the social cohesion and the strength and the advocacy to stand by each other and then sort of also fight their cases when they have to and get them out of jail or out of ICE holding or whatever?
I think we do, and every day it's getting better, right? And this is part of what I mean when I see that the at least the younger generation, my age and younger, of Muslims has woken up to this reality. It's amazing.
I see what you did there. You casually made yourself a young man. I think.
I still pretend. Yeah,
one can,
36 years young.
Mashallah. You fake it till you make it, my guy.
Exactly. Well, statistically speaking, late millennials such as myself and younger, we get our news from social media. I am exactly at the cutoff. People my age and younger are the cutoff statistically in how they get their information. Whereas even just, so it is something of a difference of mindset between who watches CNN and who checks Twitter. But to get your question, very important, very, very important, which is that it's already happening. And this is why actually seeing the way that Trump moves, Trump is a known enemy. We know how he moves. He does whatever he wants to, and then we have to fight it in the courts. And when we were trying to prepare and even communicate and sell to the Muslim American community that, yes, we have to punish the Democrats in the election. It's the only way to create an opportunity, a chance to achieve what we want to achieve when it comes to ending the genocide or whatever. It's no guarantee, but to create a chance, we know that there's going to be blowback. We know that there's going to be a cost. And that cost exactly is what we have been paying, which is the ICE detentions and even the deportations and the legal struggles and all of these things, political prisoners, the surveillance, all those things. However, very quietly, and nobody has really touted this in the news, very quietly, we are starting to rack up wins. We are starting to rack up wins, especially in the courts. That they have tried to prosecute, like at the university front, they have tried to prosecute people for anti-Semitism and for hate speech and for their pro-Palestinian activism. Judges have thrown out the cases in Michigan and Colorado and other places. Rumeysa Öztürk, the student that you mentioned, has been released. Mahmoud Khalil, we believe, is close to being released, and he was the first one. So it's very, very, others that have been abducted after them have slowly and quietly been released, or they're starting to win their court cases. So there is a growing momentum.
Are we supposed to make a big deal of these quiet victories? Is that the move?
Say again, sorry.
Is that the move to give the proper PR to these quiet victories and make them loud victories?
It is part of it. Part of it is to make people realize that this is what we knew was what was going to happen. And if there is a significant change, listen, look at how Syria happened. Okay, December 2024, nobody foresaw the Assad regime fleeing with the rapidity and the speed that it did. I believe that if the United States can be stopped from escalating its involvement in Israel-Iran, and even if we're able to strengthen the discourse that the current level of participation is too much, to the point where the United States, all it has to do is leave Israel to its own, there is a scenario in which Netanyahu flees just like Assad. I believe it. I believe that there is a scenario.
And we even know where he will go.
Crumbles.
We even know where he'll go. He'll go to Greece or Cyprus.
He'll probably go to Cyprus, but So in this context, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. This is a possible scenario, and if something even half as much as that occurs, would it have been worth it to endure the political repression? Many of us getting locked up. I myself experienced a lot of trouble when I crossed the border in airports and things of that nature, right? Interrogations, detentions, all these sorts of things. Would it have been worth it? Especially in a scenario in which the entire occupation finally crumbles. The answer is absolutely. Absolutely. Now, either there's two camps that would oppose that. The camp that says, well, that's not possible. First of all, your scenario is just a fairy tale, and we're not even going to be able to get anywhere near that. Or the other opposition, which is even scarier, which is that I'm not willing to even sacrifice that much.
Even if what you say is true.
The first opposition, right? Opposition number one, the idea that, none of that's going to happen. Again, I would point to recent history. I would point to Syria. I would point to the information war that's going on now between Israel and Iran, and how careful they are to minimize and hide the extent to which they're hurting, and how much they try to maximize and brag about even things that they haven't even accomplished, that they say that they've accomplished against the opponent. It's all a war of disinformation and propaganda. That these things are always intact until they evaporate very suddenly. To the second person, then that's a problem of deen. The second opposition, I'm not willing to even if you're right, even if this could possibly end the occupation or even just end the current genocide, that I'm not even willing to suffer that. You have some work to do between you and your Lord. That is a moral failure. So this is my we can only deal with scenarios and likelihoods. One of the things you can learn from the Zionist movement and from the history of the Zionist movement, is that they didn't wait until the opportunity was created to prepare and to plan.
They built an opportunity, right?
They built everything, and when the opportunity came, when they said that we're going to end the British mandate, the day that they ended the British mandate, they were ready. They had all of the institutions in place, and they had everything. That there are ruptures. And if you look at other people who are stateless, right, other quote-unquote ethnicities that don't have states, such as the Kurds, or such as Armenians, Armenians do, like different groups that didn't, you notice that every once in a while in history, there occur these ruptures. And if it's not purely about being in the right place at the right time, it's also about being prepared. That if you are prepared and you're in the right place at the right time, then tremendous change can happen. But you can't have the defeatist mentality of, it's never going to happen, therefore I should not prepare for it.
There's two questions that arise. One from the from both of the opposition to that idea, the parties that would be opposed to that idea. One is the idea of, can we collaborate and cooperate with existing interest groups, left or right, without compromising on Islamic values? It's an ethics. It's a much less serious question, but it does exist. People do ask that, and the other one is that, what is the threshold? This is more of a practical question. What is the threshold human cost that we're willing to pay? And when some people, I speak to a lot of people, when they look at Gaza, when they look at Iran right now, they're like, are we willing to pay these costs to get a potential solution that, is still a little vague or obtuse, or it's still a bit out of reach? So if you could elaborate on these two questions.
Yeah, very good questions. The answer to number one is absolutely it's possible, but it requires a fundamental retooling of the philosophy of what we're doing. So up until this point, unfortunately, many Muslims have dealt with politics as a game of affinity and morality and loyalty, and not as negotiation. What that means is that in coalition work, we have approached potential coalition partners, and we have been so happy that anyone would help us or pay us the time of day or give us a smile, that we've been willing to lay down on the floor and become doormats for their entire agendas. And that has no dignity in it, and it's not even strategic. That all political, part of our imagination, I think, in the American context is a bit blunted by the fact that we have a winner-takes-all system of republicanism. That if you're familiar with other types of democracy, then you know that you have to form a coalition government and everything is negotiation, right? That you've got multiple parties that have to come together to form a coalition, to form a government or a parliament, right? That this is something that's well known in other places of the world. We have this winner-takes-all mentality that we have to hitch our wagon to the right team, and it's really just being part of the right team. That's not going to work. That you have to be willing to negotiate. And negotiation is exchange. What are we able to extract? Through what leverage we can create. When you realize that it's about exchange, you then realize that this is about creating leverage and then exercising that leverage. We have not done this very successfully yet as a Muslim community, and that has resulted in most of our participation in coalition work being just sidekicks. We're really just props, right? You've got the LGBTQ, LGTV groups that are waving their rainbow flags, and they have the token hijabi next to them. That is, oh, look.
The one from the Pepsi commercial. Yeah, I know her.
Exactly.
I know her.
Diversity and
We've all met her.
Exactly. So
I know she's a nightmare.
We have allowed ourselves to be tokenized and used in this way.
Right.
As opposed to
right.
what it would look like is that we are not showing up to X. We are not lending our presence or our credibility to Y unless you give us X, Y, and Z. That is how negotiation actually happens. Since we have, well, let me put it in the positive. We have a lot of room to grow in this, but I do believe that it's possible. Once you start treating politics in this way, then you're going to have red lines. There's going to be certain things that you're not going to give up, and that's what prevents you from violating your principles. But it requires that attitudinal shift and doing the work to create the leverage, right? The other, I think,
as a man of literature and psychoanalysis and deep understanding of the human condition, I want to ask you that if you could comment on what is the kind of psychology that goes behind this desire for Muslims, and especially in the diaspora, to be well liked. This weird doormat sort of like, as long as we're nice and we can be the token hijabi or the token Muslim guy, as long as we can be Mo who loves NBA and basketball and sneakers and wants to be black or whatever, or hip hop, and why do we have this? Where's the inferiority coming from? Is it colonialization? Is it the process of immigration? Is there an example of an immigrant community that is not facing this, that have overcome this, have had a distinct identity? Or is it the fact that we don't assimilate fully, so we're always interlopers, and our young people tend to fall to the wayside, and so they, what is it?
That's a great question. I do think that it's largely the wake of colonialism and the colonial and colonized mentality. I do think that there is just, Gora complex, like everything that is Gora is right. unfortunately, when it comes to at least the diaspora. And we could also put a couple things in that basket. So it's not just all the Europeans came and they changed our minds and stuff like that. Some of it is done to ourselves, such as the attitude of, unfortunately, we have this problem of materialism, that the most important thing that many immigrant parents communicate to their children is your money, making money. That's really it, to the point where there's stand-up comedians, that are Indian and Pakistani that joke about these sorts of things because it's so well known that the absolute greatest value that many immigrant parents communicate to their children is about making money, status and wealth. Now, if status and wealth is your goal and security in the sense of livelihood, then you can't make waves. You can't stand up for what's right. You can't have a principled interaction with these types of things, right? And that compromises you very, very much so. So I think that these factors are largely responsible, and there are tons of immigrant communities that have done things a different way. If you look at the Chinese and how the Chinese exist in the United States, very, very different. In fact, there are studies that say that they measure how much a dollar spends or circulates within your own community, and the dollar that stays within one community the longest is the Chinese dollar. The Chinese, when they want to buy, they will buy buildings in New York City, extremely expensive buildings, cash, because they know how to pool their resources intelligently. They understand that certain things like banks and insurance policies are just meant to take advantage of you and exploit you. So they have their own alternatives within their communities that they provide, and that gives them a certain amount of autonomy. It's not about integration, assimilation. They're able to code switch and to exist in spaces just like anybody else. But it's a commitment to doing things differently and doing things as a community and doing things based off of principle. So we do have this problem, unfortunately. It's both got internal and external dimensions that we have to be very, very careful about. The good thing, though, is that maybe unintendedly, the United States has such a rebel and rebellious culture to it, or that sometimes the most Americanized youth, they have this element to them too, right? Where things almost fold back on themselves, where they're so Americanized or Westernized that they're not going to listen to their parents. That their parents tell them, you have to become, I call it the Holy Trinity. Muslims in America, they have the Holy Trinity, not of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but of doctor, lawyer, engineer. That you have to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, and there's no other occupation. God save you if you want to be an alim or a mullah or something like this. The response from the parents is always, what about your future? What will you do for your livelihood? Like this, like the worst thing that could happen is someone wants to study Islam. Then we complain about unintelligent Islamic discourse and scholarship. Anyway, that's another issue. But
we have the whites for that. You guys can do it. Just keep converting, and we will be fine, inshallah.
We need all hands on deck. We need the brightest minds of the ummah to study the deen, because that's where the solutions are going.
No, I'm just pulling your leg.
And when we don't, I want the audience to be very clear about this. If you only let your weakest mind study the deen, you're going to get caricatures of the deen. You're going to get simplistic black and white thinking. You're going to get sectarianism. And that is going to...
Abu Azam al-Britani. You're going to get Abu Azam al-Britani. You know the character?
I don't.
Okay, have you seen the film Four Lions?
Yes.
The white convert, Abu Azam al-Britani. That's
I forgot his name. Yes, exactly. You're going to get him. Exactly. So in all seriousness, but there's an element to, there are many youth now that even when it comes to not heeding their parents, which is like, I'm going to do what's right, even though so many young people confide in me by saying that I want to take more risks when it comes to politics. I want to go and be at these protests. I want to do these things, and my parents are always fighting me about it, right? That shows us two dimensions, right? There's the dimension of the parents that have play it safe mindset, which to some extent is understandable, but it also shows you that the youth that grow up in this country that have been a bit more indigenized in this country are much more willing and up for the task and willing to take bold action.
Yeah.
This was number one or number two?
This was number one. Number two was the threshold of the human, like, value of human life and human suffering. What are we willing to exchange in a materialist sort of sense for a goal that is not as accessible or achievable or is out of sight yet? Like, people look at Gaza and they get scared. Like, is that the number of people we have to get killed to get freedom or to get any political, points put forward?
Yeah, no, people used to laugh because I delivered this message, I think, starting in the winter of 2023, 2024, because I saw where things were headed. And I would try to tell Muslim American audiences that in order to get anything, you have to be ready to give everything. And that if anybody has this attitude of, well, I need to protect myself, that endangers all of us. So this is a hard pill to swallow. And when you are lulled into stupor in a neoliberal consumerist society where you've got every option of toothpaste and food and Netflix and whatever, this is meant to put you in this stupor where you're not ready to sacrifice, you're not ready to suffer, you're not ready to take on what is a righteous cause demands of you. So there's an inverse relationship here. If all of us are willing to sacrifice everything, we will get what we want very quickly. If only a few of us are willing to only sacrifice a little bit, it's going to be a longer and harder road. And the enemy doesn't sleep. The forces of evil do not rest. They are always trying to push the envelope when it comes to criminalizing the Muslim community here. They have been at it for a long time. They're very, very slick. They will not rest until none of us are safe, unless you're going to be drinking wine and eating pork, and that's the type of quote unquote Muslim that you are. So that's the community. That's the answer, or that's the question rather, that the community has to answer. I have hope. I think that things are moving in a positive direction. We're not there yet. We still have a lot of room to improve, but I think that things are moving along nicely, inshallah.
Sheikh, you mentioned earlier that the rules that were set out for everybody, and that the immigrant communities were like, if we play by the rules, we'll make it by. I believe in America, that weird racist trope that you did. I didn't do it, you did it. That deconstructing the idea, when looking at it like that, nowadays you see people, even the human rights narrative, Muslims are turning towards it. People are talking about the UN and liberal institutions and how we need to combat the human rights abuses and the international law violations. Is that a paradigm by which we should define ourselves? Because who really defines these rules? And what are the limitations of these rules? And we've seen a selective outrage about how the language of human rights is used to justify or downplay genocide. Like I grew up right next to Afghanistan during the war on terror. Pakistan faced the brunt of it. Afghanistan faced the heaviest brunt, and second in Pakistan. And somehow, through the lens of human rights, and one of my friends really used to articulate this much better than me, but I'll try, is that the woman with the niqab, the sort of the shuttlecock burqa from the Afghani sort of cultural background, because she is outside of the realm of the human rights conversation, because she's not a full woman yet, because we can't see her or she's not a real person. Now, I don't know how they did it, but it was magic. The average public within even Pakistan were convinced that, I guess we do need to get bombed. These guys are kind of savage and we need to play by the rules and blah, blah, blah. Not everybody, but enough people were convinced, across the world that this is the framework. The people who play within these rules that we've defined are human, and thus they deserve these rights. These are the rules. And everybody outside of them, you're not real women. Like, you have NGOs in Pakistan being financed by USAID talking about women's reproductive rights, even men's reproductive rights as women who don't have the genitals for it, or as the African brothers would say, don't have the equipment. I'm referring to the very famous Ugandan TV interview that I love. Anyways, And then at the same time, America is like drone striking, because those same people who work for those NGOs, by the way, will tweet out stuff like, drones are pretty effective. In Pakistan, they'll do this because, at least there's no casualties and they're very targeted. How did this narrative work out for us? And I still think even the government of Pakistan is being retarded, by the way. When it comes to India, they're going about, we believe in the UN and the international law. They're still playing the game, by the way. When are we going to break out of this, and how are we going to break out of the game?
I think that this is largely the rupture, maybe the biggest rupture of the post-October 7th world, is that many people, at least the people that I talk to or observe, realize that human rights was a euphemism the entire time. There's a really interesting footnote in Talal Asad's book, Formations of the Secular, where, by the way, his father, Muhammad Asad, was part of the framing of the Pakistani constitution.
Asad Leopold, yes.
Yeah.
Some of his works are enshrined in Lahore. There is a very big, where the old city is, so the British and the old Mughal city are conjunct. Inshallah, we will show you when you come here after our victories in the Ummah, across the Ummah, inshallah. There is a old minaret, like an old Mughal style minaret. You know how they make fountains and water wells, so there'll be a minar on it, like with beautiful mosaic work. In one of them, they have restored it and preserved one of his handwritten Qurans, Asad Leopold's. So even though he is out of the public sort of discourse nowadays, he's still there somewhere, in the subconscious of the Pakistani Muslim identity.
So his son, in probably his most famous book, Formations of the Secular, just in a footnote, he talks about the first use of the word crimes against humanity, and that this was part of the justification for ending the Ottoman Empire and carving up the Ottoman Empire, the Treaty of Sebra, which then was rolled back by the fighting of the Young Turks and the Turkish nationalists for the Treaty of Lausanne. But in the justification, the original drafting of the justification, it justified the intervention by the British and the French and the Western powers because of crimes against Christendom, is the original language used. And then the French objected to the language and they said, no, we can't say that. We are colonizing West Africa. They're almost entirely Muslim population. We don't want this to look like it's a battle of Christianity against Islam. And so they amended the language and used the term crimes against humanity, which demonstrates that from the outset, there were only certain humans in mind, and other humans were not in mind. The entire facade of human rights, and this Talal Asad does get into this quite extensively, though he's difficult to read in this book, Formations of the Secular. The problem was never with rights. The problem was always with the human part of human rights, because some people are not considered human, or they are considered subhuman, or not yet fully human. The niqabi, the shadori, even the big bearded man with a turban is not legible as fully human within the discourse of human rights. He is more killable. He is more bombable. He is more subjugatable. He is an eligible target. He is collateral damage. He is what our drones are precise. What are you talking about? He is the collateral damage of that logic, and she and everybody else. People have realized now that we have to move beyond simply saying, oh no, there's a double standard, there's a double standard. Of course there's a double standard. There was always meant to be a double standard. The entire frame was predicated upon a dehumanization of a large part of the world. And you really, as a Muslim, you start to appreciate Allah's justice here and Allah's framing of things in the Sharia and in the Quran, because when justice is articulated by human beings, human beings, as we said in the beginning of this interview, are tribalistic. That some of them will always be considered more human than the other. People who are like me. People in American mainstream media were saying in the whole thing with Ukraine, it's so alarming because they look just like us. Like they are white and blonde-haired and blue-eyed. They would say these things on national television with no shame, no sense of even like the politically correct discourse was not enough to hold them back from saying these things in their moments of shock, which shows you all that you need to know about how the international system was set up. The International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the United Nations, the Security Council, the IMF, the World Bank, the entire system is about preserving a type of domination, not a type of justice. And if people haven't realized that after the genocide in Gaza, then I don't know what hope they have for ever realizing it.
So I have a practical question, Sheikh, because you very beautifully exposed that the universalist facade of liberal human rights, it masks this evil structural hypocrisy that like you said, it's not a double standard. It should be down with the standard. We're done with it. We're not going to deal with it. This is not our game. These aren't our rules. But I have a practical question as just somebody who sporadically will interview people in English as well. Mostly the stuff we do is in Urdu. But what is the language and the terminology? How do we replace the framework? Like even when speaking, if I wanted to say that there was an atrocity, I would say it was a human rights violation, or I would say it was a genocide, or it was a this or that. The language that exists, at least the legal aspects of the language, are all dominated by this. And you've just enlightened me with this new piece of information that the initial use of the crimes against humanity was actually against the Ottoman Empire. I'm gonna look this up and read more about it, inshallah. But even in our regular conversations, it's so hard because the learning curve. So the average Muslim wants to believe you. The person sitting here wants to believe you, but due to technology lag and informational lag, which is being bridged by the internet, Muslim scholarship and intellectuals in Pakistan and the rest of the third world would be in the 2000s. They're still in that sort of they have that mental lethargy. They're talking about institutions. They're talking about economic competition. Hell, I even heard some people talk about the catch-up theory. If you ever studied economics, I don't know. There was this thing post World War II that the third world is going to catch up. It had algebra to describe it, to explain it. All the fancy graphs were there. It never ended up happening. But so you have people who for me to even talk to them about this, to educate them about this, to point them in the right direction, and considering that they might not speak English, I would have to redefine basic, understandings and terminologies. What does an Islamic, version of human dignity or vision of justice, what does it look like, and what is the language even to communicate these? Should Islamic terminologies be used, or should universal secularist sort of terminologies be used to describe this?
Very good. So there's a couple of different parts to the answer here. One is the centrality of crafting language, because your limit of your language is the limit of your thought and what you can imagine, what you can communicate. And language very much structures our world. It's no accident that we think through these things in legalistic terms: genocide, human rights violations, war crimes, right? They're all legalistic terms with a certain tradition. But once you realize that, and you realize that these terms have genealogies, they also have contours, right? So there's a certain descriptive power and there's certain gaps in which they don't cover. Then you can start playing the game of actually crafting language and coming up with an alternative language. Now you've got a couple different scenarios. There's a political dimension to your question as well, which is, are we able to arrive at a new universal or not? The tantalizing part of universal human rights discourse is one rule for everybody. But that was never really achieved, was it? In reality, there are tremendous inconsistencies. So the fear of going away from this universal, supposedly transcendent, supposedly fair universal, is that we're just going to go back to might makes right. Strength is what determines. The critic would say, we're already there. if you can't meaningfully prosecute a genocider, if you can't meaningfully stop a genocide while it's going on, then the de facto situation is that we are already in a world in which might makes right, and the facade of a universal human rights discourse is actually an obstacle to people realizing and acting accordingly. That if people recognized that we are in a world where might makes right, maybe Pakistan...
Isn't that a very violent and combative way of being for an individual to go into this warlike mentality? Okay, suspension of democracy, liberal thought, all of this is bakwas. Bakwas is BS in Urdu. All of this is, bakwas and... isn't that a very violent kind of tribalistic mindset? Not critiquing it on a secular or like a global universal level. I'm critiquing on the individual to throw him into this spiral without tribal networks in an urban environment, in the concrete jungle, without the social structures to protect him, to provide him security, to make him feel safe, her safe. Isn't this bringing out the school shooter in all of us? I mean, like,
I would say, rather, well, it's a very American example.
Yeah, you are an American. I'll give you an American example.
Rather than that, I don't see it that way. I see it as Plato's cave. I see it that if someone turns the lights on, you can appropriately respond to your situation. That if you are under the impression, right? Like imagine that you are locked in a cage and someone comes to feed you, okay? And you don't put two and two together. You don't realize that the person who's coming to feed you is also your captor. He's also the person that's keeping you in the cage. You might be asked about it, and you might say, what are you talking about? He takes care of my food. You might have, the Stockholm syndrome, develop a trauma bond to him and all these sorts of things. If it's pointed out to you that this person is, yes, he is feeding you, he's keeping you alive, but he's also the person who is keeping you in the cage in the first place. He's the person that kidnapped you, and he's detaining you. Then you can respond appropriately. Right now, the way that the international institutions function, the way that the international supposedly universal human rights discourse functions, it is being told that we're being fed and not realizing that we're being caged. That it doesn't actually match the lived reality in which we are living. You are simply, we are almost like, being patting ourselves on the back with a psychological wage or a psychological compensation, this pomp and this circumstance to make it seem like the world is something that it's actually not. The world right now is ruled by brute force and might makes right. The failure to recognize that means that we spend a lot of time and resources trying to put together the right court case in the ICC or the ICJ. And okay, that is, maybe you could argue that there's this sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like discursive element that you shouldn't turn your back entirely on that tool. Okay, I could be convinced about that. However, you just said it yourself not too long ago. Pakistan, perhaps more than anything else, is united upon the fact that it has a nuclear capability. That's the world that we live in. And if you don't have that capability, then you can make all of your complaints to the UN that you want. You can make all of your complaints to the ICC or the ICJ that you want. They might listen politely. You might go viral on social media with a very passionate speech. But does it stop you from getting invaded? Does it stop you from a regime change? Does it stop you from being a plaything in the hands of the foreign powers? It does not. So it's just about realism. That's my perspective. It's just about recognizing the reality that we live in right now. That the false universal of human rights discourse partially obscures the fact that the reality is very different. The reality is still might makes right. It's still about deterrence. It's still about capacity. It's still about building power and leverage. And that your enemies are only responding to the leverage and the deterrence and the capacity that you have. They're not responding to your pleas at the ICC or the ICJ. And the last part to your question is that, yes, we are required to develop an alternative discourse. And this is something, especially as Muslims, that we have the chance to offer the world, because we were able to deliver justice to people who were not, I mean, especially in historic Pakistan under the Mughals and others, where the Muslims weren't even the majority population. They were a minority that was ruling over the rest of the population, and they were still able to deliver justice, despite what Hindutva wants you to believe. They were still able to deliver justice and deliver public goods and services in an equitable way to a population and allow.
No, they built the world's biggest irrigation system.
Yes, these are the things and it didn't require one single universal law. In fact, we had legal plurality. You
Yes.
had dhimmi status. You were able to have legal plurality.
Family code different, tribal system different, leadership different.
This is what we have to offer the world. That Muslims, when they were in power and they were the leaders of the world, they were able to do it better.
Even now, by the way, the domestic troubles in Pakistan are because tribal and ethnic groups feel like this equal and same citizenship business has been a problem. The secular framework, and Pakistan is also a secular state, regardless of all the, in its actual framing, even with all the rigmarole about Islamic law and what have you, because equal and so the Christian community, for example, or the Sikh community or the Hindu minority communities, they are not treated well because this universal and same it's absurd. It's absurd.
I have a thesis. I've co-written a book on Islamic history that's going to come out, inshallah, in November.
And your co-author is, mashallah?
Called Islam in World History.
And your co-author is
part of us. Sorry, my co-author is Dr. Susan Douglas of Georgetown University. One of the things that I noticed in putting together the research for this book is that when the Muslim societies start to go into nationalism, that's when the massacres and the pogroms start to happen and the genocides start to happen.
Then I won't have any slander about Turkey on this podcast.
I'm not going to say anything about any particular nation. And I love all the nations of the Ummah. And I want the best for all the nations of the Ummah. But every time, and I want to be able to travel throughout the Ummah. I'm not going to,
I agree with you. I've made Hajj.
And Pakistan. But whenever, the logic of nationalism is structurally homogenizing and totalitarian in the sense that it must subjugate difference. It is an existential threat to a nation state to have the type of diversity that is guaranteed under the Sharia. And that's the rub, unfortunately.
It's just that we have Afghanistan, we have Turkey, we have Syria now, we have Pakistan, we have all these countries, and we have failed to reflect practically and demonstrate one of those cultures where we appreciate and preserve, except with token minorities. Like in Iran, you see sometimes in Turkey there is a tokenism when it comes to ethnic or religious minor groups. Pakistan is not even in the running. We bungled it up many times over, and it trickles down into the individual. On the individual level, that there is a inbuilt hatred sometimes you see. It's not my lived experience of Pakistan. I grew up in but then I run into someone in Pakistan and then they have just this completely weird conception of how a minority group or a religious group or an ethnic group ought to behave, and that is what is the Pakistani way. It's a complete, it's basically some uncle. It's some Desi uncle who's like, it's them.
It also turns up when refugees from Rohingya show up in Indonesia.
Yes. We had the same crisis with Afghanistan. We hosted them for 40 years, and all of a sudden state policy changed. We had troubles with Afghanistan, and it's all like, we have this terminology called namak haram, which means that you have, rejected the salt of Pakistan, even though you ate the salt. Eating the salt is like a metaphor for sharing rizq. So namak haram, and then all of this is there's a whole language that was developed around enmity towards Afghanistans and Afghanis, and vice versa. Unfortunately, the Taliban leaned into the Pashtun nationalistic sort of tendency to try to appease a very large variety population, which was not so religiously in tuned as it was in the 90s. So they were like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, Pakistan sucks. And they eat lentils or whatever. That was the joke, by the way. They would call us dal khur. Dal khur means yani eaters of lentils. Because they're saying we're Hindus, by the way. Basically, that's what they're saying.
So I mean, these things are inescapable under nationalism. Like that's my thesis, is that we have to seriously contend with, as conscientious Muslims, how are we going to get out of this framework? Because the framework of nationalism, it's a double bind in the sense that, first of all, it is the sticking point for the quote-unquote international order. At the end of the day, the international order is all nation states. And so any supposed rights that people sign on a piece of paper at the UN are going to have to be enforced at the nation state level. And people are going to check others and not check others, right? Like,
how do we transcend? Like, how do we transcend this?
I mean, at the end of the day, every political arrangement and technology has a history to it.
That was a layup for you to say, and that is why we need the Khilafah. Like, you missed it.
It's true, but I don't want to get you in trouble or get me in trouble.
No. Pakistan is very chill. Alhamdulillah, we can. It's not the Gulf.
I only hesitate to use that language because of what people think that means.
Yes.
Because people have a very simplistic and caricaturized understanding.
Let's call it a confederation for now.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that we have to think beyond the nation state, and the same logic applies to the opportunities that are created. We have to prepare for when history turns and the nation state is no more. Statistically speaking, this is history. It's going to happen. Empires rise and fall. Different political arrangements and technologies rise and fall. The era of nation states has a beginning. It will have an end. There will be something after the nation state. We have to do the work to put ourselves in a position to think, craft the language for what is going to supersede the nation state. What's the roadmap to get there? Step A, step B, step C. And then even if it doesn't unfold exactly how we thought it would, to be ready when those opportunities strike. And if we don't, this is the huge problem. This is, if you're into halak, this is all of halak's thesis in The Impossible State and of Restating Orientalism. The logic of nationalism is a huge burden upon the ummah. It takes our strengths and makes them weaknesses. That the diversity and the beauty of the ummah is completely wasted within the nation-state model. And it pits us against each other, and it keeps us at each other's throats, and we keep on dehumanizing and demonizing each other, and we won't actually allow each other to flourish. There's a reason why. Even scholastically, the golden age of Jewish scholarship is under Muslim rule in Spain. And the golden age of Christian scholarship is under Muslim rule in different parts of Sham and Egypt and whatnot. That this is not an accident. This is what Islam has to offer the world. A political arrangement and a society that does not treat difference as a threat, that does not necessitate the subjugation or the dehumanization or the complete extermination of diversity at the tribal level, at any other level. And so, this is our burden to communicate this to the entire world, I believe.
SubhanAllah, Imam, you've been great. You've been very helpful. I've taken a lot of your time, but one of the most important things that we wanted to talk about, other than all of these lofty things, is your personal journey. And if you have some time, please do comment on it. Otherwise, we can defer it to another setting.
Unfortunately, I do have to go. I have another meeting lined up.
Yeah, I thought so.
But if anybody is curious about my personal journey, the entire thing is recorded on one of the Turkish Dawah channels called Towards Eternity.
Oh, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, Towards Eternity. I did the whole convert story from beginning to end.
Did they make you play any fun parlor games?
They did put me on like the hot seat, so they made like 20-second rapid response.
Yeah, they're very sweet. It's a very nice interface. The interface, the sort of the programming they've done is very sweet. It's very well loved in Pakistan. I think they have a program in Urdu as well. MashaAllah, it's doing very well. I think they translate.
By the way, that's great. I will interrupt just like perhaps last comment that these opportunities are non-nation state ummatic opportunities. The fact that TRT World and Towards Eternity, Turkish media channels that are having channels in Urdu.
And television dramas as well.
Yes. All of these things even something as maybe silly as the Turkish dramas, Ertuğrul and Osman and all these sorts of things, these are ummatic projects.
I'm not going to stand by that, sir. Those are national treasures in Pakistan.
Good. Okay.
I just don't want to. I don't know what's still cool and what's not cool anymore.
It was never cool. It was never cool, but I think uncles and aunties and young women liked it because it was a soap opera style, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These are ummatic initiatives. To be able to produce a drama in Turkey and have it, featured in Pakistan and vice versa, and elsewhere across the Ummah. These are the types of initiatives that are going to draw our hearts closer and actually create the very first steps of networking towards who knows what's going to come, but perhaps a post-nation state order that utilizes the strengths of the Muslim Ummah in a more intelligent way.
That was the lovely and very articulate Imam Tom Facchine. He's been very kind to us, inshallah, and I hope the conversation was worthwhile. I hope I didn't interrupt too much, and I hope that you keep coming back on the program whenever you like to discuss something in detail in particular. I will make sure that the follow-up conversations are more structured and, better organized. Imam, thank you.
This was wonderful. Don't sell yourself short. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking again soon, inshallah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.